Marcus Thompson was drinking his morning coffee when everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning like any other. The sun was shining through his kitchen window, and he was reading the news on his phone. His quiet life was about to become very complicated. A loud knock on his front door made him look up from his coffee cup. Marcus opened the door to find his neighbor, old Mr. Peterson, standing there with a worried look on his face. Mr. Peterson was 80 years old and had lived next door for 30 years. He was the kind of man who noticed everything that happened in the neighborhood. "Marcus, you need to see what's happening behind your house," Mr. Peterson said, pointing toward the back of Marcus's property. "There are big machines and workers. Out there, what's going on?" Marcus felt confused. He owned 50 acres of land behind his house, but it was just an empty field. His family had owned that land for many years, but nobody ever did anything with it. It was covered with tall grass and old trees. Sometimes kids would play there, and Marcus liked to walk through it on quiet evenings. "What kind of machines?" Marcus asked, putting down his coffee cup and following Mr. Peterson outside. As soon as Marcus stepped into his backyard, he could hear the noise. There were loud engines running and men shouting to each other. When he walked to the edge of his property, he could not believe what he saw. There were bulldozers, dump trucks, and construction equipment everywhere. Men in hard hats were walking around with papers and measuring tools. Marcus felt his heart start beating faster. This was his family's land. Nobody had asked him for permission to bring construction equipment here. He had never signed any papers allowing anyone to build on his property. A man in a yellow hard hat saw Marcus watching and walked over to him. The man was tall and had dirt on his work clothes. He looked like he had been working outside for many years. "Hi there, I'm Dave Johnson, the construction foreman," the man said, reaching out to shake Marcus's hand. "Are you one of the neighbors? Sorry about all the noise. We'll try to keep it down during the early morning hours." Marcus shook the man's hand but felt very confused. "I'm Marcus Thompson. This is my land you're working on. What are you doing here?" Dave looked surprised and pulled out a folder full of papers. "Your land? That can't be right. We have all the permits and legal documents right here. The homeowners association bought this property from the county 6 months ago. We're building a new neighborhood called Meadowbrook Estates." Marcus felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "The county sold my land? That's impossible. My family has owned this property since my great-grandfather bought it in the 1920s. Dave opened his folder and showed Marcus several official-looking documents. The papers had government stamps and signatures all over them. According to these records, the county sold this land because nobody was paying taxes on it. The property was listed as abandoned. The Pine Valley Homeowners Association bought it fair and square." Marcus looked at the papers, but they were full of legal words he didn't understand. All he knew was that these people thought they owned his family's land, and they were about to build houses on it. "How many houses are you planning to build?" Marcus asked, still trying to understand what was happening. 156 homes, Dave said proudly. "It's going to be a beautiful luxury community. Each house will cost between $200,000 and $400,000. We've already sold most of them to families who are excited to move in." Marcus felt dizzy. 156 houses on his land. Families who had already bought these houses. This was much bigger than he had imagined. "I need to make some phone calls," Marcus said. "There's been a mistake. This land belongs to my family." Dave looked sympathetic but shook his head. "I'm sorry, but we can't stop construction based on your word alone. If you think there's been a mistake, you'll need to talk to lawyers and the county office. We have contracts and deadlines to meet. Families are planning to move into these houses in 8 months. Marcus walked back to his house feeling overwhelmed. How could the county sell land that didn't belong to them? How could his family lose property they had owned for almost 100 years? He needed to find answers, but he didn't know where to start. He called his Aunt Sarah, who was 75 years old, and knew more about the family history than anyone else. Aunt Sarah had always been the one who kept track of important family documents and stories. "Aunt Sarah, something terrible has happened," Marcus said when she answered the phone. "There are construction workers on our family land behind my house. They say the county sold the property to a homeowners association for unpaid taxes." There was a long silence on the phone. Then Aunt Sarah said something that surprised Marcus. "Marcus, You need to come to my house right now. There's something I need to show you. Something your great-grandfather left for exactly this kind of situation." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked. "Your great-grandfather William was a very smart man. He knew that someday someone might try to take our family land. He made preparations for that possibility. I've been waiting for this day for 50 years, Marcus felt a small spark of hope. "What kind of preparations?" "I can't explain over the phone. You need to see for yourself. Come to my house tonight after the construction workers go home. And Marcus, don't talk to anyone else about this until after you see what I have to show you." Marcus spent the rest of the day watching the construction workers from his kitchen window. They were working fast and seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Big trucks brought loads of sand and gravel. Workers put up orange fences around the construction area. Everything looked very official and organized. As the sun began to set, Marcus saw the workers putting their tools away and driving their trucks off the property. The construction site became quiet, but Marcus knew they would be back early the next morning to continue their work. He drove to Aunt Sarah's house feeling nervous and curious. What could his great-grandfather have done almost 100 years ago that would help with this situation? Marcus had always heard family stories about how smart and careful great-grandfather William had been, but he had never paid much attention to those old tales. Now, as he parked in front of Aunt Sarah's house and walked to her front door, Marcus wondered if those family stories were about to become very important. His quiet life was already changing, but he had no idea that the biggest surprises were still waiting for him. Aunt Sarah opened the door before Marcus could knock. She had been waiting for him. "Come in, Marcus. It's time you learned the truth about what your great-grandfather really did to protect our family land." Marcus arrived at Aunt Sarah's house just as the street lights were turning on. The old house looked the same as it had for 30 years, with its white paint and blue shutters. But tonight, Marcus felt like he was walking into a mystery that had been waiting for him his whole life. Aunt Sarah met him at the door wearing her favorite purple sweater. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her eyes looked more serious than Marcus had ever seen them. She had always been the family member who remembered birthdays and told stories at holiday dinners. Tonight she looked like someone who had been keeping important secrets for a very long time. "Follow me to the basement, Marcus," she said, without saying hello. "What I'm about to show you will change everything you thought you knew about our family." Marcus had been in Aunt Sarah's basement many times over the years. It was where she kept her Christmas decorations and old photo albums, but tonight she led him to a corner he had never paid attention to before. Behind some boxes and an old table was a large black safe that looked very old and heavy. "I haven't opened this safe in 20 years, Aunt Sarah said, kneeling down and turning the combination lock. "Your great-grandfather William made me promise to keep it locked until someone tried to take our family land. Today is that day." The safe opened with a heavy click. Inside, Marcus could see several thick folders wrapped in what looked like old cloth. Aunt Sarah carefully lifted out the first package and unwrapped it on the table nearby. Inside were papers that looked very old but were in perfect condition. Your great-grandfather was not just a farmer, Marcus. He was also a lawyer. He understood that owning land was not just about having a piece of paper. It was about making sure nobody could ever take that land away from your family. The first document Marcus saw made his eyes grow wide. It was the original deed to the property dated 1923. But this deed was not for 50 acres like Marcus had always believed. According to this paper, William Thompson had bought 847 acres of land. That was almost 17 times more land than Marcus had thought his family owned. 847 acres, Marcus said, his voice shaking. "But I thought we only owned the field behind my house." Aunt Sarah smiled for the first time that evening. "That's what everyone was supposed to think. Your great-grandfather was very clever. He never told anyone how much land he really bought. He let people believe he was just a simple farmer with a small property." She unwrapped the second package. Inside was a thick folder full of maps and survey documents. The maps showed that the Thompson family property included not just the field where the construction was happening, but also the shopping center downtown, The new school that had been built 5 years ago and dozens of houses in 3 different neighborhoods. Marcus sat down hard in a nearby chair. You mean all those buildings are on our land? That's exactly what I mean, Aunt Sarah said. But there's more, much more. The third package contained what looked like a business contract. Aunt Sarah explained that William Thompson had also bought the mineral rights to all the land. That meant the Thompson family owned everything under the ground, as well as everything on top of it. If anyone ever found oil, gold, or any other valuable materials under their property, it would belong to the Thompson family. But the biggest surprise was still waiting in the fourth package. Inside was a folder labeled Emergency Protection Plan in William's careful handwriting. Aunt Sarah opened it and showed Marcus a letter that William had written to his future family members. The letter explained that William had been worried about what might happen to the family land as the town grew bigger. He knew that someday, people might claim that the land was abandoned or that taxes hadn't been paid. He knew that government offices might lose important records or make mistakes, so he had created what he called a legal trap to protect the family property. What kind of trap? Marcus asked, feeling both excited and nervous. Aunt Sarah showed him more documents from the folder. William had made copies of all the important papers and filed them with 5 different government offices in 3 different counties. He had also set up a trust fund that would pay the property taxes automatically every year, even if the family forgot to pay them. But the most clever part of William's plan was what he had done with a law firm in the state capital. He had paid them a large amount of money in 1924 and given them specific instructions about what to do if anyone ever tried to build on Thompson family land without permission. The law firm was told to wait and watch, Aunt Sarah explained. If anyone started construction on our property, the lawyers were supposed to let them finish building before they revealed that the land belonged to our family. William wanted to make sure that whoever tried to steal our land would lose as much money as possible. Marcus felt his heart racing. You mean the law firm knows about the construction that started today? They've known about it since the county first put the land up for sale 6 months ago. They've been watching and waiting just like William told them to do almost 100 years ago. Aunt Sarah showed Marcus the final document in the folder. It was a letter from the law firm, dated just 1 week ago. The letter said the construction on the Thompson family property had begun, and that they were following William's instructions to wait until the building was almost finished before taking legal action. How long are they going to wait? Marcus asked. According to William's plan, they will wait until all the houses are built and families have moved in. Then they will file a lawsuit claiming ownership of the entire development. By that time, the Homeowners Association will have spent millions of dollars, and dozens of families will have moved into houses on our land. Marcus felt overwhelmed by everything he had learned. His great-grandfather had created a plan that was just now beginning to work, almost 100 years after he had written it. The construction workers who had been on his property that morning had no idea that they were walking into a trap that had been set before their grandparents were born. What happens next? Marcus asked. Aunt Sarah carefully wrapped up all the documents and put them back in the safe. Now we wait, just like William planned. The law firm will contact us when it's time to spring the trap. Until then, we watch and say nothing. As Marcus drove home that night, he looked at the construction site with completely different eyes. Tomorrow, the workers would come back and continue building houses on land that belonged to his family. They would work hard every day for months, not knowing that each nail they hammered and each brick they laid was making William Thompson's century-old trap stronger and stronger. Marcus realized that his quiet life was about to become very complicated indeed. The next morning, Marcus woke up feeling like he was living in 2 different worlds. In one world, he was just a regular man watching his neighbors build a new community. In the other world, he was sitting on the biggest secret in town, waiting for a plan that was older than his grandfather to finally spring into action. Marcus made his coffee and stood by his kitchen window, watching the construction workers arrive for another day of building houses on his family's land. The workers looked happy and busy. They had no idea that every brick they laid and every wall they built was making his great-grandfather's trap stronger. At exactly 7 in the morning, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed the name Mitchell & Associates Law Firm. Marcus's Heart started beating faster as he answered the phone. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. This is James Mitchell from Mitchell and Associates. I believe my grandfather worked with your great-grandfather many years ago." Marcus sat down at his kitchen table. "Yes, my aunt told me about your law firm last night. I'm calling to let you know that we are following your great-grandfather's instructions exactly as he wrote them. The construction on your property will continue for several months. During this time, you must not tell anyone about your family's ownership of the land. This is very important for the legal plan to work correctly." Marcus watched a cement truck drive onto his property through his window. "How long do I have to keep this secret?" "According to William Thompson's plan, we will wait until all 156 houses are completely finished. We will also wait until at least half of the families have moved into their new homes. Only then will we file the lawsuit that will reveal your family's ownership of the property." Marcus felt his stomach twist into knots. "But what about all those innocent families? They're spending their life savings on houses that are built on my land." James Mitchell's voice became more serious. "Mr. Thompson, I understand this is difficult, but your great-grandfather designed this plan to protect your family's property rights. If we reveal the truth too early, the homeowners association might find a way to fight us in court. By waiting until they have invested millions of dollars, we make sure they will want to negotiate instead of fight." After hanging up the phone, Marcus spent the day walking around his house feeling terrible about the situation. Every few minutes, he would look out his window and see the construction workers building houses for families who had no idea what was coming. By noon, Marcus decided to drive into town to see how many people were talking about the new Meadowbrook Estates development. What he found made him feel even worse. At the coffee shop downtown, Marcus heard two women talking excitedly about their new houses. One woman said she had been saving money for 10 years to buy her dream home in Meadowbrook Estates. The other woman said her family was moving from 3 states away because they loved the pictures of their new house so much. At the grocery store, Marcus saw a young couple looking at paint samples. They were discussing what colors to paint their children's bedrooms in their new Meadowbrook Estates house. The woman was pregnant and kept talking about how excited she was to bring her new baby home to their beautiful new neighborhood. Marcus drove past the real estate office and saw a big sign in the window that said, "Only 23 houses left in Meadowbrook Estates, don't miss your chance." Through the window, he could see families sitting at desks, signing papers and writing checks for their new homes. That evening, Marcus called Aunt Sarah and told her how guilty he felt about keeping the secret. "Marcus, I understand how you feel," Aunt Sarah said, "but you have to remember that your great-grandfather didn't create this situation. The county made a mistake when they sold land that didn't belong to them. The homeowners association should have done better research before they bought the property. We are not the ones who created this problem, but we could stop it," Marcus said. "We could tell everyone the truth right now and save all these families from losing their money." "And then what would happen?" Aunt Sarah asked. "The homeowners association would hire expensive lawyers to fight us. They would claim that we waited too long to speak up. They might even win in court, and then our family would lose the land that William worked so hard to protect. Is that what you want?" Marcus knew his aunt was right, but it didn't make him feel any better. Over the next few weeks, he watched the construction progress every day. The workers were incredibly fast and efficient. By the end of the first month, Marcus could see the wooden frames of 50 houses rising from the ground, where his great-grandfather's wildflowers used to grow. The hardest part was when his own neighbors started asking questions. Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived across the street, came over one evening to ask if Marcus knew anything about the new development. "It's so exciting to have new neighbors," she said. "I heard the houses are going to be really expensive. The families moving in must have good jobs. Do you know when the first people will move in?" Marcus had to lie to his neighbor's face. "I think they said sometime next spring," he answered, knowing that by spring everything would be completely different. His friend Tom from work was even harder to lie to. Tom had been looking at houses in Meadowbrook Estates and asked Marcus what he thought about the neighborhood. "You live right next to it, so you probably know better than anyone if it's a good place to buy a house," Tom said. "My wife really loves the 3-bedroom model with a big kitchen. We're thinking about putting down a deposit next week." Marcus wanted to grab his friend and tell him not to buy a house in Meadowbrook Estates, but he remembered James Mitchell's warning about keeping the secret, so he just said, "Maybe you should look at a few more neighborhoods before you decide." By November, Marcus could see that the construction was moving very fast. The workers had finished the foundations for all 156 houses. Many of the houses already had walls and roofs. Some even had windows and front doors installed. Marcus received another phone call from James Mitchell that month. "Mr. Thompson, the construction is proceeding exactly as your great-grandfather predicted. We estimate that all the houses will be finished by March. The Homeowners Association has already spent over $12 million on this project. Our legal trap is almost ready to spring." That night, Marcus had trouble sleeping. He kept thinking about all the families who would be affected when the truth finally came out. He thought about the pregnant woman at the grocery store and the couple picking paint colors for their children's rooms. He thought about his friend Tom and his wife who might lose their life savings. But he also thought about his great-grandfather William, who had worked so hard to protect the family land. He thought about future generations of Thompson family members who would benefit from William's careful planning. As winter arrived and the construction continued, Marcus realized that the hardest part of waiting wasn't the secret itself. The hardest part was knowing that when the trap finally sprang, nothing would ever be the same again. It was a cold Monday morning in February when Marcus's phone rang at exactly 8 a.m. He had been expecting this call for months, but when he saw Mitchell and Associates on his phone screen, his hands still started shaking. "Mr. Thompson, today is the day," James Mitchell said without any greeting. "All 156 houses are finished. 43 families have already moved in, and 37 more families are scheduled to move in this week. According to your great-grandfather's plan, it's time to spring the trap." Marcus looked out his kitchen window at Meadowbrook Estates. The development looked like a perfect little town. The houses were beautiful, with neat lawns and mailboxes that matched each other. Children were waiting for the school bus, and adults were walking their dogs on the sidewalks. It looked like the American dream had come to life on his family's land. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "In exactly 1 hour, legal papers will be delivered to 12 different locations at the same time. The Homeowners Association, the construction company, the county government, the real estate agency, and 8 of the largest newspapers in the state will all receive copies of our lawsuit. By lunchtime, everyone will know that the Thompson family owns Meadowbrook Estates." Marcus felt like he was about to throw up. After 9 months of keeping this secret, the moment had finally arrived. At 9 a.m. sharp, Marcus watched from his window as a man in a suit walked up to the construction trailer that served as the temporary office for Meadowbrook Estates. The man knocked on the door and handed a thick envelope to Dave Johnson, the construction foreman who Marcus had met on the first day. Marcus could see Dave's face change as he read the papers. Dave's mouth fell open, and he started making phone calls immediately. Within minutes, more men in suits arrived at the construction site. Everyone looked very upset and confused. By 10 a.m., Marcus's phone started ringing constantly. The first call was from a newspaper reporter who wanted to ask questions about the century-old land ownership dispute. Marcus didn't answer. The second call was from his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. She was crying when Marcus answered the phone. "Marcus, is it true? Did your family really own all this land? My daughter just bought a house in Meadowbrook Estates. She used all her savings for the down payment. What's going to happen to her house?" Marcus didn't know what to say. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I can't talk about legal matters right now. You should have your daughter call a lawyer." By noon, there were news vans parked all along Marcus's street. Reporters with cameras were trying to get interviews with anyone who would talk to them. Marcus kept his curtains closed and didn't answer his door. His friend Tom called at 1 p.m. and he sounded very angry. "Marcus, did you know about this when I asked you about buying a house in Meadowbrook Estates? Did you know that your family owned that land? Why didn't you warn me?" Marcus felt terrible. "Tom, I couldn't say anything. The lawyers told me I had to keep it secret. My wife and I put down a $20,000 deposit on one of those houses last month. We were supposed to move in next week. Now we don't know if we'll get our money back or if we'll have anywhere to live." That afternoon, Marcus drove to the Meadowbrook Estates Community Center, where an emergency meeting was being held. The parking lot was full of cars, and Marcus could hear shouting coming from inside the building. Marcus parked across the street and watched through the windows. He could see dozens of families inside, all talking at the same time. Some people were crying. Others looked very angry. Children were running around, not understanding why their parents were so upset. Dave Johnson was standing at the front of the room with a microphone, trying to calm everyone down. Marcus could hear pieces of what he was saying through the windows. We had no idea this would happen. The county told us the land was legally available for sale. We followed all the proper procedures. We're going to fight this in court. A woman in the crowd stood up and shouted, "We already sold our old house. Our children are enrolled in the new school. Where are we supposed to live if you can't fix this problem?" Marcus felt sick watching the chaos his family's secret had created. These were real people with real problems, and they were suffering because of something his great-grandfather had planned almost 100 years ago. At 6 p.m., the local news ran a special report about the story. Marcus watched from his living room as a reporter stood in front of his house and explained the situation to viewers. This quiet neighborhood became the center of a legal storm today when the Thompson family filed a lawsuit claiming ownership of the entire Meadowbrook Estates development. According to legal documents, the Thompson family has owned this land since 1923, and the county made an error when they sold the property for unpaid taxes last year. The reporter interviewed several families who had bought houses in Meadowbrook Estates. A young couple with 2 small children said they had used their life savings to buy their dream house and didn't know what they would do if they lost it. An elderly man said he had moved from Florida to be closer to his grandchildren and had already changed his address with the government and his doctor. He said starting over at his age would be very difficult. The most heartbreaking interview was with a single mother who had bought a house so her teenage daughter could finish high school in a good school district. The woman was crying as she explained that they had nowhere else to go. That evening, Marcus received a call from James Mitchell with an update on the legal situation. "The Homeowners Association's lawyers want to meet with us as soon as possible," Mitchell said. "They know they can't win this case in court. The documentation your great-grandfather left is too strong. They're going to want to negotiate a settlement." "What kind of settlement?" Marcus asked. "That depends on what you want to do, Mr. Thompson. Legally, you own all 156 houses and everything in Meadowbrook Estates. The Homeowners Association has spent over $18 million building on your land without permission. You could demand that they pay you the full value of the development, or you could demand that all the houses be torn down and the land returned to its original condition." Marcus looked out his window at the lights turning on in houses throughout Meadowbrook Estates. In each of those houses was a family whose life had just been turned upside down. Some of them were his neighbors. Some were his friends. All of them were innocent people who had believed they were making a smart investment in their future. "What would happen to all the families who already moved in?" Marcus asked. "That's not legally your problem, Mr. Thompson. But I understand. It's personally important to you. You have some very difficult decisions to make in the next few days." As Marcus hung up the phone, he realized that his great-grandfather's plan had worked exactly as designed. The trap had been sprung, and now Marcus held all the power. But with that power came the responsibility of deciding what would happen to more than 200 innocent people whose lives had been changed forever. For 3 days after the legal papers were delivered, Marcus didn't leave his house. His phone rang every few minutes with calls from reporters, lawyers, and angry neighbors. He stopped answering the phone and kept his curtains closed. Outside, news vans stayed parked on his street, and reporters kept knocking on his door. On Thursday morning, Marcus made a decision that would surprise everyone, including his own family. Instead of meeting with lawyers to discuss how much money he could get from the Homeowners Association, Marcus got dressed and walked across the street to Meadowbrook Estates. He knocked on the door of the first house he came to. A woman in her 30s answered the door holding a baby in her arms. When she saw Marcus, her face became angry and scared at the same time. "You're him, aren't you? You're the man who's trying to take our house away," she said. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I'd like to talk to you about what's happening." The woman, whose name was Jennifer, invited Marcus inside reluctantly. Her husband, Robert, was sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere. Both of them looked like they hadn't slept in days. "We don't understand how this happened," Jennifer said, sitting down while still holding her baby. We did everything right. We saved money for 5 years. We hired a real estate agent. We got a lawyer to check all the paperwork. How were we supposed to know that the county made a mistake? Robert looked up from his papers. We put our life savings into this house. $40,000 for the down payment. If we lose this house, we lose everything. We'll have to declare bankruptcy. Marcus listened to their story and felt his heart breaking. This was exactly what he had been afraid would happen. These were good people who had followed all the rules, and now they were suffering because of a legal mistake that happened before they were born. Marcus spent the next 2 hours visiting houses throughout Meadowbrook Estates. Every family told him a similar story. The elderly couple in house number 47 had moved from Arizona to be near their grandchildren. The single mother in house number 62 had bought her house so her son could attend the good school in this district. The young couple in house number 91 had used their wedding gift money for their down payment. By lunchtime, Marcus knew he couldn't destroy these families' lives just because the law said he had the right to do it. But he also couldn't give up his family's land that his great-grandfather had worked so hard to protect. That afternoon, Marcus called James Mitchell and asked him to set up a meeting with the Homeowners Association lawyers for the next day. But instead of asking for money or demanding that the houses be torn down, Marcus had a different idea. The meeting was held in a conference room at the law office downtown. On one side of the table sat 5 lawyers representing the Homeowners Association. On the other side sat Marcus, James Mitchell, and Aunt Sarah, who had insisted on coming to see how her father's plan would finally end. Marcus stood up before anyone else could speak. Before we start talking about lawsuits and money, I want everyone to understand something. I don't want to hurt the families who bought houses in Meadowbrook Estates. These people are my neighbors and my friends. Some of them are good people who made honest purchases. This whole situation is not their fault. The head lawyer for the Homeowners Association, a woman named Patricia Wells, looked surprised. Mr. Thompson, you have the legal right to demand compensation for the use of your land. We're prepared to negotiate a fair settlement. Marcus shook his head. I don't want your money. I want to find a solution that protects my family's rights, while also protecting the families who live in Meadowbrook Estates. Marcus then explained his idea. Instead of treating this as a traditional real estate dispute, he wanted to create something completely new. The Homeowners Association would be dissolved, and Meadowbrook Estates would become the first residential cooperative in the county. Under Marcus's plan, the families who had bought houses would become shareholders in the Thompson Family Land Trust. They would keep their houses and have legal protection for their investment. But instead of owning individual lots, they would own shares in the entire community. What does that mean for our families? Patricia Wells asked. Marcus explained that the cooperative structure would actually give the residents more security than traditional homeownership. If someone lost their job or had financial problems, the community could help them keep their home. If someone wanted to sell their house, the sale would have to be approved by the community to make sure new residents would be good neighbors. The most important part of Marcus's plan was that the Thompson family would keep ownership of the mineral rights and would have the final say about any major changes to the community. This would honor his great-grandfather's wishes while giving the current residents legal protection. And what do you want in return? Patricia Wells asked. Marcus had thought carefully about this part. I want Meadowbrook Estates to become a model community that shows how people can live in harmony with the land. All the perfect grass lawns will be replaced with native plants that support local wildlife. Residents will be required to grow some of their own food in community gardens. No chemical pesticides or fertilizers will be allowed. Aunt Sarah smiled for the first time since the legal battle had begun. Your great-grandfather would have loved this idea, Marcus. He always said that land should be used to help communities, not just to make money. The negotiations took 3 weeks, but eventually all parties agreed to Marcus's plan. The legal settlement created the Thompson Family Land Trust, with Marcus as the permanent chairman, and all residents as voting shareholders. The transformation of Meadowbrook Estates began immediately. The Homeowners Association used money from their legal settlement fund to hire landscape designers who specialized in native plants. Residents worked together to tear up their grass lawns and plant wild flowers, vegetable gardens, and fruit trees. 6 months later, Meadowbrook Estates looked completely different. Instead of identical houses with perfect lawns, the community was full of colorful gardens, walking paths, and outdoor gathering spaces. Children played in meadows full of butterflies, and adults shared vegetables from their community gardens. Marcus kept his original house but became an active member of the community council that governed the cooperative. He often gave tours to visitors who came to see the unique community that had grown out of a century-old legal dispute. The story of Meadowbrook Estates became famous across the country as an example of how creative problem-solving could turn a legal crisis into an opportunity for positive change. Several universities sent students to study the community, and other towns began exploring similar cooperative housing models. On quiet evenings, Marcus would walk through the community paths, amazed by how his great-grandfather's plan had ultimately created something better than anyone could have imagined. The land was protected, the families were secure, and the community was thriving. William Thompson's century-old trap had worked exactly as designed, but instead of destroying lives, it had created a new way for people to live together on the land he had loved so much.